Hi, we looked at the frequency domain representation of signals in the previous video, and we are thinking about how that is going to be applicable to removing noise. Okay, and the key here is Fourier series, and that's what we want to discuss in this video. Now, think about a periodic signal. Okay, let's take a square wave, for example. That's what is on the screen. And what you want to do is, so there was this guy a few hundred years ago called Fourier who discovered that any periodic signal can be expressed as a sum of various sine waves of different frequencies, and at each frequency it has a different amplitude and a phase. Okay, so you take sine waves of different frequencies, and in fact uh, what Fourier discovered was it was more precise than that. If your periodic signal has a fundamental period of f, or let's say f naught, then you take multiples of that frequency or the harmonics of that frequency, and the sinusoids at each of those harmonics have different amplitudes and phases, and you add these sine waves, you will get the periodic signal. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is this square wave is a sum of this sine wave, right, and another sine wave, and another sine wave, and another sine wave. And just with four sine waves, you can see that this red signal is, well, it's not a very good approximation of a square wave, but you're approaching it, right? Uh, Take a look at this app, and this kind of gives you a little bit more details here. So here, let's have a square wave here, and you can see that the red signal is approximating the square wave quite well, isn't it? And if I increase the number of terms, you can see that, well, the approximation is quite good. And what we are then seeing is, so this red signal is a sum of this sine wave, and then this sine wave, plus this, plus this, plus this, plus this, and so on and so forth. And what is being plotted here is frequency on the x-axis and the amplitude on the y-axis. And if you add all these sine waves, and you can see those sine waves here in yellow, right? So if you add all these sine waves, you get a square wave. Okay. So let me go back to my PowerPoint slide, and we use this idea that any arbitrary signal can be represented as a sum of sinusoids to express any signal in the frequency domain and then do filtering. So let's take a look at it here. So here's a sine wave, and you take this sine wave and convert it into the frequency domain. What would you get? Let's assume that you're not worried about the phase for a moment. So at a particular frequency, you are given the amplitude. So at one particular frequency, you have a certain amplitude. Okay. Now let's say we add a lot of noise to this sine wave. Once we add a lot of noise, the signal looks like this. That's quite noisy, isn't it? So, and now you take the Fourier domain representation of this signal and you go there. So you have this huge spike here, which is the actual sine wave, and you can see that here, right? So that is there. But in addition, you have these small peaks all around here and at this place. So now if I say, well, clean up this signal and give me this clean sine wave from here, how would you do it? Well, you wouldn't know where to start, right? But if I say, here's the frequency domain representation of this noisy signal and get me this clean signal through going here. So go from here to here. How would you do that? Well, all you need is to keep this particular signal and remove all these points, right? Once you remove all these signals, because this becomes exactly like this, and only this remains. That is the idea of frequency filtering. Okay, frequency filtering is basically removing certain components or certain frequencies of signals and leaving the signals that we want in the signal. And the basic idea here is signals that cannot be very well separated in time can be separated in frequency. And then if you remove once the signals have been separated, let's say once the noise has been separated and the uh, required signal has been separated, then you can have a filter that removes those frequencies of sinusoids from your circuit. Hopefully that makes sense.